Saturn of master bedroom. dispatched 2 squad cars. The police in Isla Vista are generally used to peeling drunks off the sidewalk and breaking up brawling frat bros. This was really serious and strange, and I think the dispatcher got the sense from my tone and how terrified I was, and she stayed on the phone with me. At one point, the banging stopped and everyone was quiet for a while. I talked with the dispatcher and suddenly looked down to see that this guy had slipped his fingers through the 1-inch gap between my door and the floor and was just kind of wiggling them around, making this weird growling sound. I screamed and backed away, which is my biggest regret about this situation, since when I look back at it, it would have been so awesome to just stomp the shit out of those fingers and hear the guy howl in pain. When the cops rolled up, I heard running and the sound of our sliding glass door opening and closing, and then he was gone. The cops never caught him. He had broken in through our side door by jimmying the lock somehow. My door was covered in what turned out to be huge gauges he'd made with a pair of scissors, which he discarded on the ground before he left. What terrifies me most about this is that I walked right past him. I looked him right in the face. I realize now that he was not trying to sleep or on drugs, but was lying so stiff like that because he was hiding. He probably heard me open the door and freaked out because he hadn't realized there was another person living there and tried to blend into the couch in the darkness. Number 3. My sister and I recently stumbled across a memory during our weekly visits. We had just moved to a suburb, our first house in a decent but isolated part of town. She was 12 and I was 7. Mom let us take our white German Shepherd for a walk. I remember the sun was setting over the desert landscape, but we weren't worried. It was nice to be able to walk unsupervised down the street. We lavished in our freedom and took our time, letting Kodak sniff and investigate everything. We had just let him off the leash and were watching him chase a rabbit. I guess that's why we didn't hear the car pull up nor the huge man that was sneaking up behind us. Kodak was a ways off and suddenly he turned back and looked at us. And like a streak of white lightning, he raced back towards us. He flew. I'm for sure his feet touched the earth. He blasted past our waiting arms and landed on the man behind us. We turned and Kodak was latched on the man's arm. Kodak was a big dog with big teeth and was absolutely shredding this guy's arm. The man eventually got him off and Kodak took a stance between us and the man. We apologized to the creep, not realizing what danger we were in. The man offered a shaky smile and told us we were good kids and stumbled off to his car. I remember there being a length of rope on the ground, which now I assume he had been holding. We looked at Kodak. He was growling and continued to growl until we made it home and he escorted us into the house. My sister told me, "Don't tell Mom or they'll kill Kodak for biting someone." It was so naive, we thought we were protecting our pet, but in actuality he saved one or both of us from a terrible fate. Much later I learned that my hometown is an area heavy in sexual predators and violent criminals. Many of the surrounding communities had passed legislation that wouldn't allow them to live in their towns, so they lived in ours. No wonder our house was so cheap. Number 4. I'm 22 and this incident happened a year and a half ago. I had just moved into my first apartment and was going in the process of moving. The door that led into my apartment locks itself automatically when closed. So I was going to the entrance of the apartment complex to get my mail while talking on the phone with my boyfriend. I returned to my apartment and sat on the bed while opening the mail and talking to him on the phone. I dropped the phone on the floor and it landed under the bed, so I had to lie on the floor and stretch for it. I saw something that caught my eye. There was someone under my bed. My eyes widened and I choked the urge to scream. The person lying under my bed was lying still with his back towards me and his head to his chest, so I couldn't see his face. and he didn't see me. Trying to be rational while so many thoughts rushed through my head, I picked up the phone and said, "Sorry, I dropped my phone. I'm just going to take a shower and call you back." The bathroom is right by my bed, so I hastily walked in, quietly locked the door, turned the shower on, and jumped out my window, as my apartment is on the first floor, and called the police. They told me to wait nearby, but to go to across the street and see if anyone comes out the door to the apartment complex. This was during summer and it was still light out. I placed myself across the street, hiding behind a car while watching my open bathroom window and the entry door. I called my boyfriend and he came out to me just before the police. I gave them my keys and they went inside. Only moments later, 2 cops came out holding a thin and tired-looking man. His eyes looked crazy, but he didn't try to get away. The policeman that had stood beside me and comforted me while the police searched through my house, I was a mess, shivering and crying, told me that the man had stood outside my bathroom door with one of my kitchen knives waiting for me to come out. This man had somehow crept in my entry door while I was getting my mail and hid under the bed. The man that was trying to hurt me turned out to be a homeless person and was placed in a mental hospital. My boyfriend moved in with me the very next day. Number 5. In the mid-80s, my mom was a cleaner in Australia. She would clean houses in suburban areas and would sometimes do houses in rural wine regions, as we lived near both. She would leave business cards at the local shops and got most of her business this way, and some through referrals and word of mouth. One day she got a call from a lady who sounded like she was around 60, asking mom to clean her old farmhouse. She made a lot of odd demands, and my mom would usually meet clients before taking on new business. In this case, the lady did not want to meet my mom and said she would leave the keys under the front doormat. Mom agreed, mainly because the lady was quite obviously wealthy and was offering to pay my mom substantially more than she would reasonably expect. Mom went to the house on a Monday morning and said she already felt unnerved by the long driveway. The house was essentially in the middle of a very large and very empty property. She found the keys and started cleaning. About an hour into the clean, she hears the back door shut. Mom was told no one would be at the house, so she immediately felt unsafe. She stood frozen in the kitchen for what she said felt like 3 to 4 minutes, although she said it could have been much longer. There was no other car on the property. She wanted to leave immediately, but had 2 rooms left to do. Both were bedrooms. She said as time passed and she heard nothing else, she decided that perhaps it was nothing. Or perhaps something had fallen and it wasn't the door after all. She walked up the hallway and stepped into the bedroom. All over the bed were black and white photos. As Mom had got closer, she realized the photos were all of her. Some were taken at our family home, and many others were taken at other houses my mom would clean. Some through windows or fences. She used the house phone to call the police and immediately drove to the end of the driveway. The lady ended up being investigated but continued to claim that it was a break-in. After some time, the police stopped their searching and we ended up moving to a new town 4 months later. Every time my mom tells me this story, I get serious chills. Absolutely a true story too. To the day my mom thinks that the lady had something to do with it, but why and for what purpose?
Hey everyone, if you've made it this far, you'll notice I really need a good outro with some scary music and stuff, so if you're good at that, please don't hesitate to email me. My email is in the description. Also, if you guys have any requests for videos on a certain topic, please say so in the comments. I love when you guys interact with me. And to some of you viewers who are hesitating to click the subscribe button,
what are you waiting for? Just do it! Yes, you can! Just do it!
Hey guys, I just wanted to apologize for not releasing it, guys, which is all Snapchats you all send me. You know how we flip through the channels while comfortably laying on the couch and settle for an episode of Law & Order or Criminal Minds. You know how you see the gruesome case play out and think, whoa, this is a good one.
Whoa.
Have you ever wondered what it'd feel like if you were the victim? In January of 2014, I went on a study abroad program to Australia. At the time, we were staying in Sydney, and most of our group was heading out that night to Pacha, Sydney for a little, or a lot of dance fun.
Really?
And I, being completely oblivious to how fun that stinking place is, decided to call it an early night and stay at the hotel. The next morning, everyone dragged in around 5 a.m. and I couldn't sleep much past their drunken entrance, so soon after I decided to head out to this side street we infamously called Burberry Street, since the Burberry store there offered free Wi-Fi. Now, call me stupid for being a 5'3" girl heading out to hang out on a foreign street by myself, but it was a beautiful, crisp Sunday morning and the streets were clean and quiet. I felt no danger ever while walking around that area. So, there I sat on the bench in front of the Burberry with headphones in while FaceTiming my then boyfriend. After a few moments, I noticed a young man, maybe around 28, had sat down on the bench across from me. And me being completely caught up in the conversation, I hadn't even noticed him or that he was staring at me. The funny thing was, he had a huge grin on his face as if we were some long-lost best friends. I just politely smiled back, then went right back to FaceTiming. A few minutes passed and the young man stood up and walked into my peripheral vision and stood there anxiously stepping back and forth from left to right foot, like a child waiting to see their birthday surprise, all the while still grinning. This is when I assessed his appearance. He was dressed in black from head to toe. He even had black hair slicked back really nice and had black eyes and pale skin. I looked at him and furrowed my brow out of curiosity, and this is when he held his right hand up and seductively bit his knuckles at me. At this point, I started to feel that fight or flight instinct and stood up and started slowly backing away, keeping the man to my front and the beginning of the street to my back. He smiled even larger and started to mimic my movements, backing away while still watching me. Finally, he turned around and walked towards his end of the street, but kept looking back and grinning at me over his shoulder. I turned around too at this point and quickly whispered to my then boyfriend, who was confused as hell on the screen, what was going on and that I was going to lose Wi-Fi really quick because I was hightailing it out of there. As soon as I reached the end of the Burberry Street back to my main street, I sighed in relief and looked both ways before crossing, and to my surprise, the man had caught up to me and was standing to my left on the other side of the street, watching me while talking to someone inside a darkly tinted black car. I freaked out and took the right and began power walking towards the nearest coffee shop, only to find that the lights were on but the doors weren't unlocked yet. When I looked back to the man who was casually walking at the same speed, car following him and staying about half a block behind me, only now he wasn't smiling. At this point I started running, and damn, you always think how fast you could run with adrenaline, right? Well, when fear overcomes adrenaline, it's a different story. My legs felt like jello and every step felt as if bricks were tied to the bottom of my feet. I looked back quickly, and that's when I saw this guy right on my tail, and that is when he reached out. He yanked my arm violently. I lost balance and smack. My feet flew out from under me as I landed on the concrete in this order: elbows, palms, face, and then the rest of my body. I tried to get up as I hit the ground, but everything was dizzy and in slow motion. Thankfully, a nearby restaurant owner was unlocking the restaurant's door and saw what happened and rushed at us while shaking his fist at the man. The black car gunned it down the street, and the man smirked and held his hands up, slowly backing away and then turning around and walking swiftly away. At this point, I started shaking violently and crying out of fear and then eventually pain. The restaurant owner kindly rushed me into his shop and sat me down at the table with a pack of ice and soon a cup of coffee. Eventually, the police took a report, but nothing could be done. I refused to go to the hospital, and thankfully it was only a couple of bad bruises and skinned elbows. To this day, I still don't know the man's intentions, but I am 100% positive they weren't good ones.
Rape.
If that restaurant owner hadn't been coming into his shop early that day, I don't know where I would be. Number 2. This happened to my father in 1975 in a little country bumpkin town when he was 7 years old and his sister was 9. I will be typing this out as he recounts what happened. My father was a truck driver who had to be up at 2 a.m. every morning. That meant we had a rule in our house that no matter what, you can't wake Dad up when he goes to bed at 7 p.m. My mother worked at an old folks home till 10 p.m. every night. So for a couple of hours, it was just me and my sister in the house by ourselves. It was our bedtime one night, so me and my sister went to bed. In a couple minutes, I heard something hitting the side of the house. Then it started hitting my window. It was really weird, so I got my sister to come in my room. We looked out the window and saw a man bouncing one of my toys against the window and catching it. He put his hand to his mouth and motioned for us to be quiet. Then, he motioned for us to go outside and play with him. We were frozen in fear. Then he started walking away and we couldn't see him out the window. We ran to the kitchen and there he was motioning for us to open the sliding glass door. We knew we couldn't wake my dad up, so we ran and hid in the living room. The man walked to our front door and started whispering something we couldn't understand and making scratching noises. All we could do was cry and remain paralyzed. We saw car lights approaching the house. It was my mother returning home from work. We watched as the man ran off the porch and hid behind my father's truck. We watched the man smile and wait till our mother got out of the car. She got out, opened the trunk, got her belongings, and walked up on the porch. I'm embarrassed to say we were too scared to open the door and warn her. All we could do was watch as the man sneakily tiptoed behind her. She opened the front door and shut it behind her. She saw us hiding, and just as she was about to yell at us for being up so late, she saw our fear-stricken eyes glued to the glass on the front door. She turned around and saw his face pressed against the glass and him jiggling the doorknob. She screamed, put all her weight against the door, locked the door, and called my grandfather, who lived a street over. Then the man shouted profanities and how he was going to rape her children in front of her. She called the police and told them as well. Next thing we know, my grandfather is speeding up the driveway with his gun out the window, just firing it randomly.
America!
The cops pulled up just as the man took off into the woods. They saw his back, but that was it. They chased through the woods with dogs and a whole squad out searching. Other officers inspected the house and saw multiple scratch marks at our doors and the side of the house. Apparently, he tried to break in and couldn't, so he tried to lure us into letting him in. They never found who it was, and that was the last we ever saw him. We were all pretty traumatized for a while, but it didn't bother our dad one bit. In fact, he didn't wake up the entire time. So, weirdo back in 75. I'm so glad we haven't met again, because if we do, you'll be the one who says, let's not meet. Number 3. Around 6 years ago, I worked in a small convenience store in a pretty quiet neighborhood. I was around 18 at the time, maybe a little older, and all of the staff members were female. With it being such a small store, we literally had 5 staff members who rotated shifts. I remember that when this incident took place, the manager had decided to take sick leave, and that left little old me to run the store as I had been working there the longest. Our tiny little shop opened at 5 in the morning, and being the good sport that I am, I decided that I would work the early shifts because the other members of staff were a little nervous with their lack of training on opening, and the fact that it was in the middle of winter, it was actually a little unnerving opening a store completely on your own while it's so dark and evidently quiet. This one morning, I opened the shutters at around 4:30 a.m. I turned on the crappy little heater as I made my way out to the back to make myself a coffee. Then went to the front of the store where our newspapers were sat, waiting to be put onto the shelves. I got the papers out and headed outside for a cigarette before opening. The few feet of snow added to the eeriness of this morning. Around 6 a.m. every morning, we would get a steady flow of builders and workmen coming in to buy a few Kit Kats and Red Bulls. Knowing them all quite well, I often took some form of comfort from knowing that if anything went wrong, I had a lot of big men heading in to save the day.
Big man.
This morning, 6 a.m. came and went, and I had literally not had a single customer. I bet the snow is too bad to work, I thought. I flicked through magazines and drank too much coffee just to keep occupied. At around 6:30 a.m., I popped into the kitchen to turn on the kettle and I hear someone come in and cough at the counter. I make my way from out of the back and see a tall, lanky, intoxicated man standing there, staring at the cigarettes. I apologize for his delay and ask him what I can help with. I'm horrible. I was taken back a little bit by what this man had said, and I repeat myself and ask what I can help with. I need you to punch me in the face. I'm a terrible man. I don't know why I did it. I don't know. At this point, I was borderline shitting bricks. I know that if this man wants to hurt me, there is literally fuck all I can do. I'm tiny in comparison. I try to play it off as a joke and say something along the lines of, "Don't be crazy. I don't go punching people." The man is not amused by me. For the first time, he looks at me, leans over the counter, and starts slurring disgusting things that he wants to do to me. What if I fucked you so hard you couldn't breathe anymore? What if I made you bleed? I'm going to make you gag on me for being a slut. I need you to punch me. My heart had stopped. We had no panic buttons. The only phone I had was just out of reach, but even if I had gotten it, there was literally nowhere to lock myself in while I waited for help. I was frozen. I just stared at this man blankly until I heard, "What the fuck did you just say?" And a loud crack as I watched my bleedy raper friend's jaw was no longer in line with his face. Apparently, when I was making my coffee, 2 customers had came in. A lanky raper guy and one of my faithful builders that was later disappointed no one had informed him it was a snow day. My builder pal wrestled our lovely friend out of the store, where he managed to pretty swiftly disappear considering the amount of snow. That morning, I made my builder friend a cup of tea and didn't charge him for his purchases as a massive thank you for what he did. God knows what may have happened. Number 4. I was 13 and just had my elementary school graduation ceremony. My friends and I decided to stay outside late and celebrate. We didn't drink at the time, so our idea of celebration was playing Manhunt or whatever around our neighborhood until about 8 or 9 p.m. As the sun began to set, my friends made their way home one by one. A couple of my friends and I decided to stay out a little longer. To us, this was living dangerously, especially since our neighborhood was considered extremely unsafe. My girlfriend at the time, Victoria, said she had to go home first and check in with her mother to let her know where she was, as we didn't have cell phones at the time. She said she would go home for a second and come right back. She only lived about 2 blocks away from where we were hanging out, so no one made much of it. 10 minutes had gone by and we continued to play our games. 15 minutes had gone by and she still never came back. I've always been an unusually paranoid person. I currently have an anxiety disorder, so maybe that's why. So when she didn't come back, I started getting very concerned. It didn't make sense for it to take her this long to cover 2 blocks there and back. My friends reassured me that she was probably just convincing her mother to let her stay outside. Finally, after about 20 minutes, we see Victoria coming to us and crying with scratches on her right arm. She told us that on her way back to the park, there was a car following her and she started walking faster because she was getting creeped out. She's used to getting whistled at by older men. She was a pretty mature and brave girl and usually didn't lose her cool when stuff like this happened. But I recall her saying that this time, a feeling of dread and gloominess washed over her. About after 30 seconds, the car pulled up next to her and a man in a mask came out and tried to grab her. She screamed and tried fighting back. The man was about to drag her to the car when suddenly another car was driving down the road, passing by them. When it came close enough, the man let go of her arm and went back to his car and drove away while she ran for her life back to the park. By the time she got back to the park, there was only 2 people remaining, me and Victoria's best friend Jennifer. Petrified, Victoria begged us to walk her back home and said that her dad would drop me and Jennifer off at our houses. It was pretty dark at this point, so obviously we agreed. We walked through the field and were walking through our school parking lot when suddenly we got blinded by the front lights of a car. As you would suspect, the man in the mask came out of the car. At first, I thought if he got close enough, me and my two friends might have had a shot at overwhelming him since it was 3-on-1 and would have had a chance to get away. At the very least, I could hold him off while they made a run for it. What happened next stripped me of every last bit of courage I had while fear and panic quickly came over me. 2 other men had come out of the car. One of them was a giant. At this point, I was scared shitless. There was a few meters between us when they came out of the car, but you could still hear them talking. "Oh look, she's got a friend. Let's take her too," one of them said excitedly. I was probably the most frightened at that point. These monsters were going to take my friends and do God knows what with them.
I know what.
And chances are they were going to kill me if I stood in the way. I had to think quickly because they were getting closer. The parking lot was at a slight slant, sort of like a driveway, so there were bricks laid out to keep some of the teachers' cars from rolling backwards during the day. I honestly don't know what to call what I did next. It was either an act of bravery or complete insanity. I always considered myself to be a bit of a timid boy. Even cowardly at times, I always avoided fights and I used to get picked on, even though I was stronger than a lot of people in my grade. But this time, something came over me. I quickly grabbed one of the bricks beside me and threw it onto their car. It smashed their left light, which really pissed them off. I yelled at Victoria and Jennifer to run to the opposite direction while I held them off. I grabbed another brick and threw it into them when they tried to run after Victoria. It did keep them away and buy my friends a bit of time. Now, I should tell you that I ran track and I was pretty goddamn good at it. Top 3 in the city actually, so I was quite a bit strong for my age. And I was more than confident that they wouldn't catch me if I ran. After about 10 seconds, Victoria and Jennifer had covered maybe 40 meters or so, giving them enough distance between us. That really pissed the big guy off. He pulled out a box cutter and started charging at me. At this point, I ran to my left and sprinted as fast as I could and didn't look back. I ran all the way to the fence that bordered the school property. Unfortunately, it was way too tall for me to climb and the men were gaining on me quickly. Luckily, I remembered that close by, the bottom of the fences were cut open wide, enough for me to slide through. I knew this because I used to go through that hole to get into my friend Martin's backyard. By this time, the 2 smaller men were at really close while the big fella was some ways back. I was pretty exhausted since I was running in dress clothes. On top of that, it was dark and I was having trouble finding the hole in the fence. I remember when I saw it, I ran for it as if I had been in the desert and saw an oasis of water. I tried to slide under the fence and run to Martin's back door, but one of the men had grabbed my tux jacket and tried to pull me back to their side of the fence. Growing up in this neighborhood, I had experienced a lot of scary stuff, but I had to say this was by far the scariest moment of my life. Have you ever felt that powerful feeling that transcends fear? The only word I can think of to describe it is death. I felt death. I felt my heart seize up as my limbs got heavier, all while my mind started becoming hyperactive as the stench of alcohol on the man came flooding into my nose. It was honestly as though the Grim Reaper himself was holding on to me. I knew that once I got dragged to that side of the fence, I was going to get stabbed or worse. I clutched onto the fence as tightly as I could. I didn't try to say words at first, I just tried to scream as loud as I could so anyone in the houses could hear me. Then, when I noticed a light in Martin's house along with some neighbors turn on, I started screaming for Martin and screaming for someone to please help me. Martin's dad was a very large and terrifying man and he always keeps a machete in his house for safety. He's one guy you absolutely never want to fuck with. So when he pulled the backyard door and saw me getting dragged through the fence, he charged at us like a wild boar. The man had let go of my jacket and told his accomplices to run for it. "Shit, someone's coming, let's get the hell out of here," he said. When Martin's dad got a hold of me, he just cradled me as I sobbed uncontrollably and apparently blacked out in his arms. I don't remember it, but he recalls that I was muttering some words telling him to find Victoria, but I was talking too fast for him to understand properly and my eyes were rolling back into my head. I'm pretty sure I had a seizure. Police and ambulance came and I was taken to the emergency room. I explained to them what had happened and they went to Jennifer's house, where Victoria was staying, and got her side of the story. There wasn't much the police could have done since we didn't have any idea what they looked like since they had masks on. They also said that since incidences like this happen in my neighborhood so frequently, there was even less they could do, especially without any leads. That's the worst part of it all to me. It happens too often. Victoria moved from that area shortly after, and for the rest of the time she spent in that neighborhood, she wasn't allowed to leave her house. I too am now living in a different area. Sometimes I go back there to visit my old friends and take a walk around that school park. I loved that school, but the memory of that park still haunts me. I still get a cold shiver down my spine when I see it. I never want to go there again.
I want to start off by saying these stories may not be the kind of scary stories where you feel like you're going to be murdered or anything, but it's definitely creepy knowing any of these things can happen to the average person. Even you. Let's begin. When I was a teenager, my mom was having a hard time raising 2 children as a single mother. She wasn't working, but my brother was still a baby and he was keeping her up all through the night and was very colicky and always screaming. While I was staying with my grandmother, she went to get groceries at the store. She came back ecstatic for the first time in quite a long time. She said that she met a great upstanding Christian man who gave her $100, claiming that he felt it was called upon him by God to give her the money. He got her all flustered and blushy by complimenting her jacket. She thought this was great because she was really into the biker kind of look. She was so happy to meet such a nice guy. They exchanged numbers and agreed to meet up later for a movie. The guy stopped by and I didn't like him. Something about him just threw me off. I didn't know if it was just me, but he made me overly suspicious. My grandmother taunted him about his beliefs, basically told him that he was full of shit. She was very blunt like that. My mom brushed it off and nodded at everything he said, debating a little bit here and there, but mostly just trying to have fun. My mom went to the movies with the guy and said that it was okay, but kind of awkward because the movie wasn't really her style. She said that she was going to have a few drinks with him at his house and would be back later on that same night. I had a sinking feeling in my stomach, as along with my grandma. I believed this guy was full of shit and was using being a man of God to disguise something worse. He made me really uncomfortable and was overly friendly. Not in a perverse way, but just in a creepy way. My mom came back a few hours later really freaked out. She said that when she got to the guy's house, he had a weird collection of women's leather jackets. Now, my mom loved leather jackets, but was a bit creeped out. So she asked him why he had so many. He claimed women would just leave them there and she could take any one of them she wanted. She was already wearing one. She politely declined, and I believe she said it was when he told her that he would go make her a drink in the kitchen. She jumped out the bathroom window and took off. We thought it would be over by then, but it wasn't. but not in the sense of footsteps on leaves, but what a heavy-footed person would make on an old wood floor. It was extremely loud. I got my gun, grabbed my headlamp stored in a small compartment up above me, and waited to see if it would stop. Right at that moment, it did. And that's when I saw something that scared the absolute shit out of me. On my rainfly, the gleam of a flashlight, faint but there. I shouted, "Hello?" And right when I did, it sounded like 10 people suddenly running away from me in every direction. I dropped out of my hammock onto the ground, frantically turning on my headlamp and shining it all around me. raises and she starts to growl and creep toward the tree. I'm panicking. I have nothing other than my hiking stick. My dog barks once. She's 40 pounds, by the way. She's not an attack dog. And she starts sprinting towards the tree. I instinctively crouch down. She reaches the tree and a turkey takes off from the other side, gobbling as it flies away. I can still feel my pulse in my eyes as I watch it fly away. I sigh, pet my dog, and check to make sure I didn't shit myself. I snap a few pictures of the weird bones and make my way back. I still hike through there, and the bones are still there untouched. No way am I touching them. No idea where they came from. Probably some weird old coot trying to scare people. It definitely worked on me. Tennessee has some real bumfucky people out in nature. I hiked all around while in school there, made some good memories with a girl in the enveloping nature. Tennessee has good roads to popular hiking sites and tons of mini trails branching off. Sometimes you need to know what to look for as far as trail markers go, because the interesting ones are always a good ways out. There's one spring waterfall that spills across a mossy granite wall towering over a shallow stream that empties into a decent-sized pond. I went out there with a friend last time and we got separated on the way out. I have no fucking clue how this happened. We've each been hiking for over 10 years. I've gone over it 1,000 times in my mind, and it has to be this one ledge system. To get to the top of the fall, you need to take a longish detour that has a lot of old wooden railing and a three-way branching ledge system. Okay, so I've taken all three routes and ended up at the same spot. They take maybe 3 or 4 minutes to blast through, and they're kind of like rocky corridors. I don't take the left one anymore because I'm 90% sure these big stains in the middle are blood. Don't want to know what happened there. It's really odd because the left path is by far the most inviting. Flowers bloom from the vines that are etched into the moss-matted bedrock. Anyways, I'm 45 seconds ahead of the girl I mentioned earlier, and I opt for the right path when I realize that I should tell her to avoid the left path. It's really hard to reverse given the sloping angle of the path and a few short drops that become narrow climbs. Fuck it, it's faster if I speed through and then yell down to her. I get out of the right corridor, swing around to where the middle path drops off, and have snuck up and taken it at some point. We hiked fast, too. We never went back, and I don't think we ever will. I want to start this video off by saying that these stories aren't the kind of stories where you will sit in your room terrified, but instead to let you know that these kinds of things can happen to anyone and that you should be aware of your surroundings. Because even in a public restaurant, you can witness some pretty terrifying things, or even worse,